Hey, Cody.
Hey, how's it going, Sasha?
Really, really great. I am excited. This is our 10th WanderbackLIVE virtual fireside chat. Can you believe it?
Nice. I can't. It really doesn't even feel like many. It's awesome.
I know. It's really, really cool. Well, today for everybody who is tuning in, we are looking at pushing the boundaries in malt innovation. And we have a serious expert joining us in a few minutes, Teri Fahrendorf, who has 30 plus years in the industry. And I'm super stoked to meet her. We worked with her, didn't we, Cody, when we were doing our farm to glass estate release?
Yeah, we did. She was pretty instrumental in kind of consulting the whole fermentation part of that project. As well as that new spirit end of it. She was huge. It was really important part of it. So it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and we'll get into it. Yeah. She really helped us because that was this is the first whiskey we've done with barley from our farm, and we didn't malt it. So it was really important to kind of get that kind of whole innovation piece with the mash bill right. So it's going to be really cool to talk to her. She is also the founder of Pink Boots Society, which I'm excited to learn more about. So I think, Cody, we'll just go back screen and introduce her and maybe see everyone back here in a couple of seconds.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Hey, Teri.
Hi, Teri. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, enjoying this gorgeous weather. I'm in Seattle. Cody is in Hood River, and you're in Portland, right?
Correct.
Whereabouts are you?
Well, I live in a neighborhood called St. John's, which is near the prettiest bridge in all of Portland. So that's my neighborhood.
Gorgeous. Good for you. You had a good weekend?
Yes, I did. Went hiking a couple of times, got some exercise.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight to talk about malt innovation, your 30-year plus career as a female leader in our industry. We're excited to cover all sorts of things with you. But let's first off talk about like a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how did you get started in the industry?
Well, I'm from Wisconsin, and I was a computer programmer at one time, but I did not like cubicle life. So I attended, who does? So I attended the Great American Beer Festival 1 year back when it was joined up with the American Homebrewers Association conference. And I met some people that had been in high tech, but had jumped over to brewing professionally. This was a really long time ago. It was 1988. So I've been in the industry 32 years. And at that time, there was about 50 large breweries and about 50 craft breweries. So, I never would have guessed that my career would have just ridden this revolutionary wave that we've had in beer for the last, 30 plus years. And so when I attended that, I met these wonderful people. I was just there for my hobby. And then I came home and I thought, they talked about this school called the Siebel Institute. And I thought, I'm going to attend that school and I'm going to become a brewer. And I thought I can always fall back on computer programming, but I never had to.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, I know a lot of us usually have, one person that kind of sticks out sometimes as somebody that's helped guide us through the industry. Was there a mentor in particular for you that, kind of stuck with you through a lot of those earlier times throughout your education and kind of helped push you in the direction that you ended up in?
Well, what's interesting is that there were so few of us and there was no internet. I mean, information was so hard to find that we mentored each other. So, people like John Harris, Dick Cantwell, Val Allen, Brant Johnston, Alec Moss. There's a lot of brewers. A lot of them were part of this homebrew club in San Francisco I was a part of called the San Andreas Malts. And so It's a great name, huh? The San Andreas malts. So about 10 of us ended up going pro about that same time in the late 80s. And we really, there was nobody really to talk to. So we mentored each other. And so I could say I have a lot of mentors and they're all about my age.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. To kind of know somebody that, you know, started out on that first initial wave, which is, you know, now it seems like it was a little while ago, but really, you know, it wasn't too long ago. Are there any, you know, fun stories that kind of stick out to you as well from back in those days, like the early 90s, late 80s, when people were still getting kind of into this? Even stories from like the Great American Beer Festival that kind of stick out to you? Because I know those things can be a lot of fun for people in this industry.
Oh yeah. You know, when I attended that first Great American Beer Festival, I saw a woman get up on stage and win a medal. Her name was Melly Pullman, and she's a professor at Portland State University in supply chain management. She teaches a course, an online course called, I think it's the business of beverages or something. And so, you know, it's good for, you know, people want to be beer makers, whiskey makers, if you really want to learn the business side of the liquid beverage alcohol industry. But just seeing her I was able to visualize someone my size, a female, in that industry. And I thought if she can do it, I can do it too. She's my size. So that was pretty cool. Some of the other fun ideas, I mean, we used to smoke cigars. You know, way back, the master brewers would bring their wives to the spring meeting and have a band and they'd dance. And none of the guys my age wanted to dance. So we didn't. We just went outside and smoked cigars. Well, let's see, funny stories from back then. Well, you know, on the design side, a lot of our guidance really just came from books and styles. Like if we could get an imported beer, we would say, wow, I wonder how this is making. We try to make it. And for a lot of beers, the first commercial example you had was the one you brewed. So like the first IPA I drank was really my IPA that I made at Triple Rock. You know, wow. I mean, I had Liberty Ale before that, but you would read about these ancient styles and then you would make it because there were no commercial examples. Now India Pale Ale is everywhere. But back then, if you wanted to taste it, you would read up about it, study the historical styles, and then you would brew it. Now, a lot of my friends were very invested in using European ingredients because all of the beers they were making were European. But I saw a lot of those breweries go out of business, and I didn't want to lose my job. In fact, my very first brewing job did go out of business. So I made a decision early on to use all American ingredients. And I had friends, professional beer friends, that, you know, my peers that would say, you can't make an IPA with American ingredients. That's a British style. It has to use British malt and British hops. And I said, well, British yeast made in the United States. Are you importing your water? I mean, come on. So I would harass them right back. But now American IPAs are everything, and the rest of the world is making them. And I'm proud to say I was one of the first people to make an American IPA. I believe that my Bombay Bomber at Steelhead Brewing in Eugene was the first commercial IPA that was always on draft 100% of the time, starting in January 1991 when we opened. I was not an owner. I was the hired gun brewmaster for 17 years. But that Bombay Bomber was on tap forever. And a lot of people, brewers, professional brewers, passing through Eugene on the way to the Oregon Brewers Festival would stop in like Mecca to have a pint of my Bombay Bomber. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. I mean, I feel like we could talk about this time period for so long just between you and I. I mean, I'm super fascinated with like the prohibition times in this country and whether or not that hindered us or actually helped us in some ways be more creative in spirit production and beverage production. Because it really seems like, you know, we lost a lot of tradition, but what came out of that, you know, about 60 years, 50 years later was a lot more innovation and creativity.
But we lost our tradition, so we really didn't have any partly because of prohibition. But there are regional differences when you go to when you go to the East Coast, they definitely still look at Europe, and they're happy to use multiple different base malts because they want German malt for the German beers, and they want, British malt for the British beers. Whereas out west here, we're pioneers still. And so we like to say, well, let's invent something. Let's make something up new. And so, probably the craft whiskey makers on the East Coast are still looking to Scotland and being really stuck on using imported Scottish malts. We're out here, like you guys are totally innovative and saying, what's available, what's local? Let's use that. Let's come up with something that nobody's done before. Let's come up with our own design. And so I'm thrilled that I was able to start my career on the West Coast, because that innovative pioneer spirit is really my thing. And to always feel like you're tied to tradition like the East Coast is, that's not where I want to be with my, beverage recipe development at all.
Yeah. Well, and nowadays you're over there at the Malt Innovation Center.
Right.
And so,
we don't have to look at European malts and say, oh, let's just make American versions of European malts. We're like, what are the brewers doing that's kind of crazy? Or the distillers, what are they doing that's interesting? How can we help them make more of that, make it better, make it different? It's kind of like, you have a box of Crayola crayons and it comes with 64 in the box, and all of a sudden you'd say, hey, I got, color 66 and 67. Are you interested? Brewers and distillers are like, what? A new color? Let's play with it. On the East Coast, they're like, if it doesn't come from Germany, I'm not really interested. Yeah, whatever.
And I feel like there has a lot of consumer drive out here as well for things like that. I know for myself as a big time beer lover, came up working at breweries as well early on in my beverage career. I would never be afraid to try something new on the wall. If I see a new beer out there, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to at least have one. And I feel like that type of thought is a big thing and a very common thing here in the West Coast, where a lot of people are very adventurous in what they're willing to try and what they're willing to drink. And it actually helps drive some of this innovation between our brewers and our malters, and even all the way back down to the farmers, which is really cool to see.
Well, if you think about it, our state here, Oregon, is only probably about 160 years old, whereas the states on the East Coast are much older. And, the buildings out here, there's not even any buildings I can think of off the top of my head that are 150 years old. Whereas on the East Coast, there's buildings that are 200 years old. I mean, I think that you grow your roots a little deeper, you get a little stuck. We're a little more mobile in our thinking. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. So, a big part of these things that we do is very educational based. So really quickly, could you just give people a little bit of a crash course of what happens when a grain is actually malted really quick, so we, get everybody kind of on the same page at what we're going to talk about here?
You bet. So malted barley, any seed can be malted. If you've made sprouts in a mason jar at home with a screen and water, you basically are malting that seed, whatever that seed is. So malted barley is barley that's been germinated and sprouted, and then we've tricked the little seed to send up a little shoot that's going to become a plant, but we've kind of stopped that, and right when that little plant is about to emerge from that seed, and then we kill it, don't we? We use heat, and the enzymes are preserved, but the little plant itself is pretty much dead. So we stop that with heat, and then we dry it. But we've released all the enzymes that are naturally present in the barley. Mm-hmm. And so when you hear people talk about malt, they mean malted barley. But you could have malted chickpeas, garbanzos. I mean, you could have malted lentils. I mean, literally malt any kind of grain. We do malt rye, oats. Some of this stuff is not actually for sale. We're still experimenting with it. But malted wheat is out there, malted rye is out there. But that's the base idea, is that you take raw barley, the seed, and you sprout it, germinate, grow it, and then you dry it. And that's your base malt. Now, your specialty malts are where you've done additional processes, or if you're Canadian, processes, and you're doing, you're using heat, so heat, time, and moisture. So really, heat, time, and moisture to develop different kinds of flavors. And so that's where the 64 different colors in your Crayola cran box come in. Is you've got just a handful of base malts, and then you have all these different flavors that you could play with to come up with a recipe that you like. And you guys have done that. I mean, we helped actually, but we helped with like one of your experiments. And but you came to us with your recipe already. You didn't say, hey, what do you recommend? You were like, here's our recipe. Can you do it? And we're like, yeah, sure.
Nice. So out of curiosity, where do you see kind of the expansion stemming from, I guess, in this debate of how malts that become available to people like ourselves and brewers really evolve? Is it more of what the farmers are planting and then that base expands and then it adds more to what we're able to do in the specialty world? Or is it more the specialty world taking a lot of that base and just ever expanding as we get better there in that regard?
I'd say it's a combination of both. What'll happen, if I understand this correctly, and I am not an agronomist, a farmer, a grain buyer, or a scientist, or even really a maltster, I'm more of a brewer, but my understanding is that agricultural universities are always developing and working on new varieties of barley. For one thing, we've got the San Diego weather marching north right now with climate change. So that's going to change where barley is grown, because barley is more temperate and will need to either march north as well, or learn to be a little more drought tolerant. Now, when there is a drought, what happens is that little plant, barley, wheat, whatever, little grain plant, will put a lot of energy at first into growing the cellular structure of all the cells. And then after that, as you get your rain, it'll plump up. That little kernel will plump up with that moisture, and that's all your starches that will become sugars and then alcohols, right?
Yep.
So when you have a drought, the natural tendency is to build the structure, but then not fill it out. So that's where you have high protein, because those structures are proteins. That's where you have high protein barley. Now, what we need, and protein is great if it's animal feed. I mean, barley is the best nutrition in the world for animals. Better than corn, better than anything else. But it's also a little more expensive because it's a boutique crop. So I will say that you hear about those Arabian horses in Saudi Arabia, and they're racing camels. Guess what they're eating? Barley. They're not eating corn. So at any rate, so we need to have more drought tolerant crops. Also, all those crop scientists are learning how to make corn that can handle colder weather. So suddenly we've got corn being grown in Canada. That's encroaching on barley's traditional growing areas. We get our barley from the United States, most of it from Washington and Idaho. The Palouse area in eastern Washington is very big. We get some from Oregon down by Klamath Falls. We also get it from Montana, but mostly, obviously Western states. That's why we're called Great Western Malting Company, because prior to Great Western being built in 1934, right after the repeal of Prohibition, any malt was coming from east of the Mississippi or Europe. So all of a sudden, repeal of Prohibition, we're like, we should have some malt being grown in the West. We shouldn't have to be importing all this malt from Wisconsin or Minnesota or somewhere. So tell me your question again, because sometimes I get off track.
Oh, it's okay. I was just wondering, what really is driving the evolution of all of these options, that we
specialty malts, right? Yeah, well, those, as I said, those crop scientists at the universities are always developing new malts, not just for drought tolerance, but also, if you think about it, they develop a new barley by breeding different barleys. That has hybrid vigor. Then all of a sudden you monoculture it up and it grows, and then you plant some in the ground again. Guess what you were doing? These are clones. You're replanting clones. You ever see, like, what is that called? Anyway, there's some movies out there where they clone people a few too many times and they're a little, not so smart anymore. Well, with the barley, it gets a little weaker over time. And so, because it's really at that point a monoculture clone. So those, say, university agricultural barley developers, they're never going to stop developing, even if we didn't have climate change to worry about, because there's going to be a shelf life or a year span for every type of barley. Don't get too attached to your Clogus. That's history. Don't get too attached to your Harrington. That's history. Now we have some Copeland. What's next? Well, there's a lot that are being grown right now, and not all of them are okayed by the American Malting Barley Association. They have to be tested. We're part of that testing process. So every year, starting, well, pretty soon, right around now into August, more like August, we start getting winter barleys, and then later we get spring barleys. And part of what the Malt Innovation Center does is that we're testing all these new crops and new varieties of barley to see what's really going to fly. Not only do we want to know how well these new varieties will sprout, do they have even germination? Because if only 50% of your grain will germinate in the first whatever day, and then the second half, 3 more days, you can't make good malt out of that. It's all over the place. You really need consistent, even germination. So, so we can tell our malt plant, which has very large batch size, what to expect, because barley is coming in from different microclimates. We have barley coming in from dry land, which is waiting for rain. We have barley coming in from irrigated fields. We have barley coming in from sea level and from altitude, and they're all going to react differently. And barley doesn't talk. It doesn't say, I'm thirsty, I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm too dry, I'm too wet. So we have to figure it out in the Malt Innovation Center so that the plant gets it. So that's a big part of our fall, is test all these new crop and new variety barleys that are just coming off the field. Then once we get past that, we're already into like January or so. Then at that point, we can focus more on specialty malts for several months. So for specialty malts, some of it is we'll have customers talking to our sales reps, our Great Western malting sales reps and our country malt sales reps, saying, I think you guys need a biscuit malt, or something, or whatever they're going to say. I really like this particular malt made by another supplier, but they're from Europe and I really want a local supplier, but I can't find an American malter that makes this malt. Can you guys do it? So we'll experiment with that. Sometimes it's like, well, we do need a biscuit malt, but let's not just pull the trigger and say, oh, we're going to use barley automatically. What we did, here's what we did, is we have a little tabletop coffee roaster. And because coffee beans are larger than barley, we immediately voided the warranty by adding extra screens so the barley wouldn't fall through. But we tested wheat, we tested barley, and we tested rye. And you know what? The rye was the most interesting. It had these nice toasty character to it, lots of intense and different flavors that were more robust than what we were finding in the barley and in the wheat. A little bit of that traditional rye spiciness, really delicious. So so we went with that one. Nobody else has a biscuit rye, nobody that we know of on the planet, but we went with it because of the 3 grains we tested for for biscuit. That was the most interesting one.
That's fascinating. And I mean, going a little bit further back, I had no idea that the Malt Innovation Center was around since 1934.
Well, actually, Great Western has been around since 1934.
Pardon me, Great Western.
Yeah.
That's a long time. How? Yeah, and then I mean, with your time at the Malt Innovation Center, how have you kind of seen things evolve over the years between Great Western, you guys, and I mean the game in general?
You mean evolve for malt, or what do you mean?
I suppose, like in your processes, like what new things have you seen come on over the years? What have like new things that you've taken on, new explorations, things like that?
Well, here's an example. Crystal malt. You've heard of it?
Oh yes.
I mean, you guys use it, right?
Absolutely.
And so crystal malt was developed in Great Britain in I think the 1840s or something like that. And basically, you take what we call green malt. Now, I'm not talking green barley like raw barley. I'm talking malt that's already been through its entire process except for the drying part. So it's still damp.
Okay.
And it's still alive, but we put it into what's basically a giant roaster. So it's kind of like a giant coffee roaster, right? It's a big drum.
Mm-hmm.
And we heat it to saccharification temperature. So if you know the beer side of things, you know that you have a mash tun, and you're converting your starches to sugars with the natural enzymes. Well, when we do a crystal malt, every little kernel is like a little teeny tiny mash tun.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually liquefies. The sugars liquefy in there. That's why when you break open a crystal, it's glassy. Okay. So, but to call it a crystal, it has to be crystallized or have saccharification and then roasted off to whatever color you want. Has to happen in a roaster which is dry heat. But we thought, what if you use damp heat? What if you use steam? You can't use the word crystal. So we have what we call caramel steam. And so we invested a lot of money to put in giant steam boilers. So now we have the capability to make caramel steam. And we have a 40-color caramel steam, which is delicious. And a lot of brewers have told us that they've been able, flavor-wise, they have found that it allows the hops to shine through a little more than with a regular crystal of the same color. And that's really intriguing. And so we're getting kind of a different kind of a flavor, even though the same color. So we're working on some other colors of caramel steam because we feel that why not have a whole line of different colors for brewers to play with. But that's kind of an innovation that happened. It started outside of the Malt Innovation Center because we put in those boilers as we were building the Malt Innovation Center in 2015. And now the Malt Innovation Center is involved with developing new caramel steam malts.
Wow, that's so cool. You just kind of like mind blew me right there.
Yeah.
So where do you kind of see the industry in like coming years evolving next? Are there things in the works that you guys are really excited about over there, or are there areas that you kind of see coming down the road that might be innovative and new and creative for brewers and distillers like ourselves?
Well, people are concerned about calories, and so there's this whole wave of White Claw, like hard seltzers. I've never actually tried one because it's like vodka and seltzer in a can, whatever, my thing. I like real flavor and I like tradition, but a lot of people grow up and they're like, what do I care about tradition? So maybe they don't. And so if that's what appeals to them, we have hard sodas, hard root beers. I mean, basically what's interesting as far as trends go, before this whole COVID thing took off, there was the trends to me seemed to be anything that had alcoholic would now be also made as a non-alcoholic beverage. And anything that didn't have alcohol, like kombucha or coffee, carbonated coffee, or whatever, anything that like soda, root beer, seltzer, anything that didn't have alcohol now has alcohol added. And before everybody had to stay at home, basically there was a growing number of places that you could have alcohol. So you could go to the zoo and get a beer and walk around and look at the elephants and the tigers, or you could go to the barbershop and, have your beer or your soda or something. And you go to the movie theater and have a glass of wine, everywhere. It's certainly in Oregon, or certainly in Portland, Oregon, we are a drinking culture. And considering I grew up in Wisconsin, I'm kind of used to that. Mm-hmm. So I have no issues with the drinking culture. It works for me. I'm luckily a moderate drinker. Sometimes I don't drink at night, but I like to have my good choices when I want to have a good choice. So,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like for everybody, there comes a point in their professional career where the reason that you're enjoying these beverages changes. You know, you become a little bit more analytical about things. There's a lot more thought that goes into the entire process of what you're drinking and why, and kind of what you're looking for. And this next little bit really kind of ties into that, as well as people now being stuck at home and being forced to consume things on your own. We just recently sent you and your husband some samples of our whiskey releases. And not only were the notes that you guys gave us super interesting, but what I found really fascinating and something that I really wanted to share with our followers and consumers in general at home is the proper way of tasting and analyzing, whether it's a spirit or a beer. And you guys just seem to hit it so like perfectly on the head. So, you know, could you give me some like tips on ways that you're preparing when you set up for formal tastings? And what are just some things that you go through as far as your checklist to make sure that you're prepared?
Well, I'm getting prepared right now.
and Teri, do you and your husband professionally taste test beers? Is that part of your kind of side gig together?
Yeah, you don't earn any money at it, but it is fun. So we are professional beer judges. It is a lot harder than it sounds because you are spending your entire day judging, and you have to pace yourself, and you have to write good notes, and you have to stay on your game. And that night you got to go to bed early because you cannot go get drunk and have a hangover the next day, because they will never invite you back to judging again if you show up hungover. And if you are, you better keep your mouth shut because you're not doing it right. So I love the smell. So at any rate, I've got your samples here, and I can do a live sampling if you want and talk about things. Yeah, let's do it. Why not? So if you were going to, let's say, do a whiskey tasting at home. Now, I want to tell you, I am a beer judge, but I use that knowledge for the whiskey tasting. So I'm not a professional whiskey judge, but having developed my palate and my taste skills, I felt like we could do a pretty good job. My husband is also a brewmaster, as am I. And so it's kind of cool because we get to dynamic duo professional beer competitions, because we can room together and they save money if they pay any of our hotel at all. So that's cool. First of all, when you wash your hands, no scent on the soaps. I use unscented soaps. Always use unscented soaps. If you are judging with other people, unscented deodorant, but wear it because nobody wants to smell you either. Okay. And if you use moisturizer, better be unscented as well. Although I don't use that because I don't want to get grease on the glassware. For beer, we might use different glassware, but today, I'm just going to tell you what we did, because, I mean, we don't know how to judge whiskeys, but we went about it in a way that we thought would be a good way. So now I'm really into Chinese green tea as well. So I've gone to a lot of gong fu ceremonies, and one of the things they do there is they have you smell the cup. And because these whiskeys are so aromatic, I thought it would be very important to smell the empty cups as well. So we use two kinds of glasses. One of them is just a little votive candle glass. These are great for tastings. I mean, we do this at home a lot. We'll just like, hey, let's do a whiskey tasting tonight, or whatever, liqueurs from around the world. Let's taste whatever, these wines, beers. So we'll just like line them up, a whole bunch of these. But the new really cool glass for whiskeys is this little chimney glass. What is this called? This glass? I believe that's
the Glencairn glass.
Yes, that's the one. It actually says that on the bottom, actually. Oh, I didn't notice that before. I think it's etched or something.
Yeah. I will absolutely agree with you. I mean, I didn't realize how big of a difference glassware makes until I got into formal somm training. And, you know, you start using all of these different glasses for things like oaked Chardonnay, unoaked Chardonnay, Zinfandel to Syrah, and all these different like varietals, and the aromatics, the way the glass focuses these things for you is night and day difference. So like you're saying, it really, really does make a huge, huge difference in what you're doing.
Yeah, and you might find that some glasses give you, like at one time we had these glasses we had picked up that were for beer that were like stemware, and every dark beer we drank out of them tasted metallic. Finally, I thought, we can't have that every stout we're drinking all winter happens to taste metallic. Yeah. So let's try it in a different glass. Sure enough. And then I have a friend in the beer industry who is kind of a beer trainer. And so I said, here's 2 glasses. They're your metallic trainers. But if you find a glass that will always give you a certain result, that especially if it's a negative result, hang on to those glasses, because those become your trainers when you are training or helping other people to understand. So as far as I've noticed with whiskey, I haven't noticed any bitter or metallic or any kind of characters coming out of either one of these glasses. And we've used these a lot. Mm-hmm. So I've got the whiskey at room temperature. And so what we would do is we would just put, maybe a 1/4 of an inch, just a small amount in each glass. And you can give them a little swirl. And here's the thing, is your sense of smell is about 10,000 times more sensitive than your sense of taste. So if you're going to smell any defect or anything, you need to smell first. So you don't even want to be tasting for the first 20 minutes of your judging. You just want to be smelling and smelling again. And now it's sat for a while. How has it changed, the smell? And then smelling again, and then maybe a little refresh, smell it some more, and add some water, smell it some more. So that's what we did. We started with these 2 glasses, just smelled them differently in the glasses, and they did have slightly different aromas in the different glasses. Then we, then we did a refresh in each glass. Then we poured this one into here and just smelled the empty glass. Got to do that. And then smelled this one again. And then we added a little water to this one and smelled it. And then once we got through all that, we retopped this one with just whiskey neat. And then we had the whiskey neat against the one with a little bit of water in it. And we just use a little pitcher like this for our water and just give it a little bit, just a little cool water. I mean, we just use cool water out of the tap. But we like to pour the water. See, by the time you're done with all the smelling, hopefully the chlorine that might be in your water system might have, gassed off, so that, so it's good to pour your water right at the beginning so that any chlorine that's in it can kind of escape.
Yeah.
Teri, how long were you doing the nosing for before you even got on to pouring in some water?
Before we even tasted it?
Yeah.
At least 20, maybe 30 minutes of just smelling and writing notes and smelling at different weights and writing notes. So 20 to 30 minutes just of smelling. And you can, since your hands are neutral, you didn't use any soap, you can put this around and do this. Sometimes people will take, as long as your paper is neutral, you could put a paper over it and try to let the volatiles kind of collect a little bit. So we did a lot of that. And then you'll see on my notes that I had aromas and I had lots of notes, and then I had tastes and I had 3 words.
Right. And when you're writing down your nosing notes, are you trying to find the exact word, or do you just tend to write what comes, or do you try and piece it kind of together?
Well, if you just put down a word that comes, that's usually your intuition talking, and I do like to listen to my intuition. So if all of a sudden it's like, this reminds me of something, summer sausage. I'm from Wisconsin. And I actually had a beer once that reminded me of summer sausage. So I wrote summer sausage on the list. And then when I went back and did this before I tasted, when I judge beer, I'm usually judging up to 12 in a flight, and I will smell through. And by the time I get to my last one, I have to start over again because they're a different temperature. Then I smell them again, and then I'll taste them, right? So I got summer sausage. Okay. I write it down. I come back around again, and then I realize that it's kind of a smoky phenolic character with a little fruitiness in it, which is your fruit wood smoked meats, right? So it's not like a salami, but that's why. There's a reason why.
Interesting.
And then you said, well, what about, you know, does it just come off the top of your head sometimes, or do you think about it? Other times it'll be like, oh, I'm getting something. What is that? You know, and it took me a minute to figure out it was ripe banana. So I was like, oh, what is that? What is that? And I couldn't place it at first. And then I go, it's banana. I said to my husband, he's like, what? And then he goes, damn it, you're right. And so it's good to smell and with other people, because one of you will catch it, and then once you say it, then the other person will be like, you're right. Because the thing is that no whiskey smells exactly like a banana. It smells like a banana with a little bit of smoke, and there's a peatiness, and you know, maybe there's a little toasty kind of you know, marshmallow, campfire marshmallows. But when they're all together, your job in judging is to tease those apart and put real words on them. I mean, you could throw around isoamyl acetate and trans-2-nonenal and use all these scientific words, but nobody understands what the hell those are. So just use your everyday words.
Yeah, interesting. Brilliant. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So then you tasted, and as you said, you've got so many left taste sensors that list is shorter, and that time that I presume is shorter too.
Yeah, and then exactly. So it's much shorter. And besides, once you start tasting, you're like, oh, you kick back, you want to go grab your cigar. Just kidding. And so you start relaxing once you have a little alcohol in your system. So you got to do your job before you taste, kind of, you know, because that's your job. And you just got to pick it apart really with the smells quite a bit. And sometimes when you start tasting, then your mouth says, now I want something to eat to go with it. So when you're smelling, you're just smelling. You're really focused on the smelling. The one thing that people should know about tasting, though, is that you also smell from inside of your mouth, right? So it's called retronasal. So a lot of times people will do something where they'll just do micro sips. You can take a sip on your tongue. Now, sometimes this is easier with beer because it's less alcohol. It doesn't numb your tongue so much. You could take a little bit of something on your tongue, cup your tongue so you hold it, and then you kind of suck in air and make bubbles. And it's bubbling on your tongue. And then you uncup your tongue and let it flow down here, and you'll get those tannins. And so, and then you swallow it. So there's that. And then after you swallow it, sometimes you will like close your mouth and try to breathe out of your nose and see if you're smelling something on the way out, because that breath is going past your mouth on the way out. That's called retronasal. We didn't actually do the retronasal. We forgot. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. So I think that of our 3 batches we sent you, you liked batch number 1 the most. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Would you share with us your notes on that one?
Okay, I got my notes.
If you have them there, or
I typed them up for you. I typed them up for you. Let's see. Did I? Oh no, that's your questions. Okay, so
only have it.
So for number 1, these are my like handwritten notes here. The first things we were getting was kind of a caramel sherry kind of character, like you find in Macallan, like Macallan 18. It was really nice. Just a little bit of buttery in a nice way, with just some banana coming in at that point. You know, a hint of vanilla coming in, some charred oak. And it's funny because sometimes these things are like a parade across your nose. They kind of come in their order that they want to come. They're not just like all at once. Sometimes you tease them out kind of as you can find them. So some charred oak at that point. And then words we were just coming up with like wonderful, beautiful. And then we're like getting some phenols with a little peat smoke and some charred oak at that point. And then we were kind of finishing with a little marshmallow. So those are kind of my notes on number 1.
Lovely, beautiful. And what was your take on the kind of the toasty kind of smell in batch number 1? For me, it's not smoky, but for me, I have this like campfire almost like a back door opens and someone lets campfire smoke in. But again, I was wondering what was your note on that?
Well, we really felt that it had, even though you guys didn't use any peat smoke, did you? I don't think you did. No, so this is the recipe that we brewed for you, the same recipe? Okay, so no peat smoke in that one, but somehow it actually had a little bit of that phenol, the phenols, the phenolic peat smoke, just a tiny bit, kind of blended with a charred oak, kind of a
That's where you was the charred oak, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're getting like the macallum kind of, and the caramel kind of went into that sherry character. But really, it was kind of a charred oak and then peat smoke kind of a character. And we did get the marshmallow on that. Now, let's see, one of these, I wrote marshmallow. Did any of the other ones have marshmallow? No. So that one, the marshmallow, even had a little bit of a campfire marshmallow, but more marshmallow than campfire. So,
yeah, wonderful. Thank you. I love it. Cody, shall we move on to talk about our collaboration with Teri to do our first estate run with the unmalted barley? And now we're going to put Cody to the test, Teri, because I'm going to challenge him to taste like you do when he tastes that whiskey.
Yeah, so first of all, Teri, did you get a chance to try that new make spirit that came off the stills after we distilled that down?
No, I never had any of that. I was just there for the brew day, and then it was very fun, the whole thing, how we had to transfer it out there to Clear Creek and everything. But no, I never had the new make.
Well, I'll make sure you get some of that. I still have some in a bottle as kind of like a memory, if you will, little keepsake. But
I would like your words on your new make, and I'll tell you why. Because I run our sensory panel, and so I have sensory panel words, what we call flavor attribute words for malt, and we're made from malt. But I don't have sensory attribute words for new make, but I need to come up with them. So if you have about 10 or 12 words that you can send me along with that, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you my full analysis that I did for that whole thing.
That'd be great.
And I found what was really interesting in that whole process of distilling it down, the Clear Creek stills, those Holstein stills that Joe and Caitlin use, each one of them just putting off such a unique flavor into that distillate. It was phenomenal. You'd go to one still and it'd be like Valencia oranges, and then you'd go over here and it's toasted almonds, and over here is just like chocolate oranges. And it was just kind of phenomenal to see it all come off that way. And then once we put everything together and it all mellowed down and we diluted it down to barrel strength, it was just this beautiful bouquet of watching all of those kind of nutty, fruity, and chocolatey elements meld together before they go into the barrel. It was really, really exciting. I think everybody was super stoked on the final product. And then, I've pulled some samples today from 2 different barrels that we currently are using in our rick house. So one of our cooperages that we work with is called Canton, and they specialize in mostly wine barrels, but they do a lot of spirit work as well. Their craftsmanship is pretty fine, so all the grain is very, very tight on these barrels. And with them specifically, what we've chosen to do is use barrels that only receive a heavy toast. And with their cooperage in particular, their toast level goes pretty deep into the wood. So in our non-temperature controlled aging site, where it gets pretty warm in there in the summertime, it actually works really, really well because that spirit doesn't actually get into any of the raw wood. It still maintains a lot of that toast exposure. And then we're using a little bit more of an American tradition barrel, where we do a char level 1 and a high toast on the inside of the barrel, and we're getting those barrels from Independent Stave Company. So it's pretty fascinating to see these 2 very different styles of whiskey, that all started the same coming out of these barrels. So
are you using any Oregon oak? I'm just kind of curious. I know some of the wineries are experimenting with that.
Not yet. What I've noticed is that's still a pretty expensive venture. The Gary Oak scene was just so depleted from what I understand. You know, we just kind of talked about this at the Whiskey Forum, and I watch all these, you know, Westland videos with Matt Hoffman talking about
amazing.
Oh, he's phenomenal. And it blows my mind as a local of the Northwest as well, that Seattle and Portland and even all the way down into like Sacramento were just massive oak forests, you know, before all of this. And then it's just disappeared. And yeah, the whole thing is super fascinating to me. Tasting Westland's Gary Oak whiskey, seeing what they do at Clear Creek with Oregon Oak as well. I think there's a lot of potential there because those whiskeys that come out are so distinct. But yeah, I mean, as we get a little bit further, I'm sure we'll venture in there. We have a lot of oak trees popping up on the property that I'm very interested in seeing what we can do with someday down the road.
Yeah, we're gonna set Phil into to barrel making next.
Well, worst case, you get a branch, you know, and you chart yourself over your campfire next to your marshmallows, and then you augment your barrels by sticking that in the bundle.
Right, that's not a bad idea, actually.
Just to kind of see two barrels side by side, or you know, even take some off, drop that in, and then give it a couple of days. It won't take long to extract some flavor. Not a long time, really.
Not a bad idea.
We love experimenting.
Cool.
So, Teri, tell us a little bit about what it was like, because we asked you to do this mash bill with our unmalted barley grown on the farm, and getting that proportion right in that mash bill was a very important thing for our final taste. Tell us a little bit, if you can, about how that kind of worked and what was kind of going through your mind as we were embarking on that adventure.
Well, I was worried about the milling of it because raw grain is like hard as little bits of steel. So you guys had to have it milled somewhere. I think you got it milled up in Hood River there at
Double Mountain.
Double Mountain. That's right. Yeah, those guys are awesome. It's really cool. They can help with that. But I didn't want it. We get our stuff milled at the local homebrew shop, and they have a wonderful little 3-roller mill, but it's not as hardcore as the professional ones. So I was afraid of like causing an issue with their mill. So you guys got that milled separately, and then we just made sure it was very well blended in with the rest of the malt bill, the grist bill, so that because I was worried it could, you know, I didn't know how the husks would react, if it would want to gum up at all or something. I cannot speak to what kind of flavor you got out of that, because I don't, you know, it's not like we did a side-by-side with and without the raw barley. I know that raw barley will definitely give you, it will definitely give you cloudiness. So there's probably some proteins that escaped and got into your wash with that. But, you know, it didn't cause any issues with the brewing of the wash. So that was my main worry, but it seemed to be just fine. And you guys got to use the stuff from your farm, so that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. It was also, you know, fascinating this past February getting to be around all of these other distilleries and whatnot from around the world, and meeting a few guys that run operations that run strictly off unmalted barley. And one of the things that I, you know, was asking them back then was, you know, are you doing stripping runs for all of these things to kind of clear out, you know, any unwanted flavors and smells? And a lot of them, you know, are running it through 2-3 times to extract that stuff. But I feel like there was a very fine line that we had to walk in this fermentation process, because these Holstein stills that we were using, like I referred to, you're not allowed to do a stripping run. Basically only run it through one time on those things. So, you know, it was a very, very precise process that I think you guys absolutely nailed right on the head. It was very, very well done.
Well, I think those are pretty traditional stills. Yeah. So, you know, you're not going to be able to do quite the wacky science stuff that people do nowadays, but you're going to get a more traditional flavor from them, which is really important. I know one time the Master Brewers Association had a meeting down at Oregon State University, Corvallis, and they had 2 identical beers made with the exact same barley. One was malted, and one used added enzymes, not natural enzymes because it wasn't malted, right? So the exact same beer. And I will tell you, the beer that used the malted barley tasted better because there's something in the malting process that brings out the richness of the grain.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking about people that are making whiskey 100% with added enzyme, I'd have to taste it against the exact same, whiskey made the same grain that's malted. But if it's anything beer, I'd probably prefer the malted.
Yeah.
Right. And Cody, remind me, what was the percentage? It was around 10, 15%,
like
was it in the end?
11%, I think, is what ended up getting used.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
And then
so it is interesting because you're using then the enzymes from the malted. Yeah,
you're getting your enzyme from the natural malt. You don't have to add added enzymes because it comes from the malt side, but yet you get the terroir from your farm. So it's really a very good combination.
Yeah. Well, we hope so. Well, on that note, Cody, do you want to give us some tasting notes of our very, very young whiskey?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the Canton here. Right off the bat, though, if you're just looking at things visually, it's really already apparent, that the Canton is a little bit lighter than the ISC. We're already starting to see that type of influence from the char on the inside of the barrel take effect. You also see it right off the bat in the nose. And I find this really common in there as well between the ISC and the Canton, is that there's this development of caramel flavors that's coming from that char rather than just the purely toasted barrel. And so that's already starting to show up. This whiskey, for everybody that's watching, is about 7 months in barrel, almost to the day at this point. We're just past a week of being exactly 7 months in. And the development's gone pretty quickly to this point. And like I was kind of stating before, those tasting notes with the new make spirit, a lot of those are still very present here and kind of sticking out. So, the ISC, what kind of hits you in the face first is the chocolate. I get that a lot. It's very dusted, kind of like baking chocolate, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And then the citrus.
We got that in your number 2.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Hot cocoa, baker's chocolate.
Yeah, I think with all of our whiskeys,
get that number 3 as much.
Little mellowed out.
Mostly in number 2.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty common thing with a lot of our whiskeys that we do, and watching this grain bill recipe kind of evolve through the distilleries that we use. That chocolate really always kind of sticks out, but it changes. Like for me, in our first 3 batches, it was very much like smoked chocolate, more like Mexican chocolate. And then at the very end, cocoa nib is kind of what I got off of batch 3. But here it's still, it's kind of like that raw baking powder where it's not overly sweet. It's more like cocoa. And then, there's tons of citrus in there. And you're starting to see the development of those caramel notes, which is really nice. Graham cracker. And the funny thing to me is, like, this marshmallow that we're talking about, I see it so much less in the ISC than I see it in the Canton. Like, the way the marshmallow flavor jumps out of the Canton at me and kind of hits me right in the face, it just doesn't happen with our ISC barrels the same way. It's really kind of fascinating. Yeah. And then on the palate, it just kind of is like a burst of citrus, really. I mean, it's that pith, it's the orange peel. It gets followed out and kind of rounded out by this buttery kind of chocolate note. And then visiting the glass after you dump it out, you see this salinity in a lot of our whiskeys. And I think it's really present here as well. You almost get like this salted caramel type of note, which I find to be pretty traditional and really kind of appealing. As far as the Canton goes, I mean, it's marshmallow. It is like straight marshmallow. And yet another really fascinating aspect of this is that Phil and I were kind of accidentally experimenting, I guess, with these Canton barrels, where we had some in the mid-level of our barn and then some in the lower level of our barn, which see very, very different heat exposures. The mid-level being much more reflective of what it is outside and kind of catching a lot of the heat in the barn and holding it in. Whereas the lower level is much more cellar temperature-like. You know, it won't really break 66 degrees in there. When you start tasting these whiskeys coming out of the toasted barrels in that mid-floor, the marshmallow turns from like this raw puff marshmallow into more of like a campfire toasted, deep, rich, melted marshmallow. And same thing for like a graham cracker. It's kind of like a burnt graham cracker almost that you smell. And it's super, super fascinating, but very appealing. And so from now on, I think it's something that we've figured out in our barrel regimen to use these toasted only barrels in that mid-level of the floor to kind of get that type of extraction of flavor that we're looking for in development.
You need a rotation system or something.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm working on that one right now. You know, I really think what is going to end up happening is we set the second floor as a place for the beginning and the end of all whiskeys. Yeah. You know, it sets this really great base layer of rich flavors the first couple of years of the spirit's life, and then we move it downstairs into ex-bourbon barrels where it picks up a little bit more vanilla and some traditional flavors like you'd see from single malt done in Scotland. And then if we use any other finishing barrels, you know, we can go back upstairs and let that exposure really take place and take hold. But, you know, from what I've seen so far from these two whiskeys that we did, it's a very clean whiskey too. And that's what really surprised me with using the unmalted barley, is that the finished product it's elegant, it's nice, it's very refined. And there's nothing really too linear about any of it that sticks out at you. You know, it's, for a young spirit, it is very, very drinkable at barrel strength, you know, on a nice hot day. So I think that says a lot.
You're making me realize it's dinner time, and maybe I'm going to skip dinner and move straight to dessert.
It's happy hour.
That's
Definitely
right.
is happy hour. Well, we are getting almost to our time. I wanted to wrap up, Teri, if it's good, and just talk a little bit about the Pink Boot Society. At the very beginning of our chat, you were talking about, you know, back in the day, seeing the first female kind of get up there and inspired you to say, well, why can't this be my career? I can do this, by seeing somebody like me up there, another female. And so I know that you are the founder of Pink Boot Society. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for that? How you set it up, and what that's all about? Because I just think that this is a tremendous thing for all of us women in this industry.
It is, and it's getting more exciting all the time. It started out in 2007. I was on a road trip visiting brewing friends and relatives and just any brewers who wanted to invite me. And I met these young women who were brewers who I'd never even known existed. And I had been a brewmaster for 19 years at that time, and they had never even heard of me ever. And so we were like, "What? You exist? What? You exist?" And so I really, you know, I had my peers that, as I was telling Cole, that, you know, we mentored each other, but some of these women were really feeling alone, like they were the only woman brewer in the whole world, and it was so lonely. And so I felt this desire to kind of create something. Well, first it was just a list. I was collecting names on a list. How many of us are there? Beer, you know, brewers, women brewers, and made this list. And then the Craft Brewers Conference was going to be in San Diego, so I called up Laura Ulrich, who's currently the president and works at Stone Brewing, and said, "Hey, the Craft Brewers Conference is going to be in your town. Should try to get the women on the list together." She said, "Yeah, let's do that." And at that meeting, I said, "What do you guys want to be, a list online or an organization?" They said, "We want to be an organization." I'm like, "Well, I don't know what that means, but I might need some help." And so then basically they voted that it was women beer professionals. And it's been that way until just a few months ago, when we realized that a lot of our members are now crossing over with all the other fermented sciences. So now, you know, there are breweries that own distilleries that own breweries that own wineries that own distilleries. breweries that own cideries and cideries that own breweries and whatever. So we're like, okay, let's just make it all women who are involved in fermentation, and that includes distillation, and that includes the supply side. So if you're a hop grower or a grape grower or a barley grower, or in my case, working for a malting company, if you're a woman, you're. And so it's now an international nonprofit. There are about 2,500 members. Our biggest fundraiser is on or around International Women's Day, which is March 8th every year. We work with a hop company to develop our own hop blend. Now, I don't have any idea what the whiskey women and the wine women and the kombucha women and the cider women, and I don't know what all the ideas that, I mean, it's going to be so cool because all these women are going to come in with their ideas, and they're going to come up with ideas how they want to help raise funds. Because the hops is great because, I mean, we had 420 breweries all over the world in March who participated, and they all brewed with this hop. That was the thing. And Pink Boot Society gets $3 a pound for the hops, this particular hop blend that's sold. And then with any luck, normally these breweries would send some of the money they make to Pink Boot Society too. Of course, now with COVID-19 and everyone staying home, all bets are off. But it's our biggest fundraiser of the year. And we need that because we went from, we started with scholarships a few years in. I was able to get a 501c3 tax exempt charity status, which means you can donate and the money you donate is a tax deduction. That's pretty important. And so now we're trying to raise money because all these chapters, there's like 97 chapters all over the world. Yeah, I saw that online. There's a lot.
Wow.
I don't know the statistics, but there's a lot. And so now they're saying, hey, can you help us set up a scholarship program in Peru or in Spain or in Hong Kong or wherever? And oh my gosh, that takes money because we got to help them become their version of a 501c3 charity there so they can develop their tax exempt status and raise money. And then, we teach them. I mean, we've got all these volunteers because we have chapters and they have chapter meetings. It's all educational. We have our own conference every 2 years. That's going to be cool because, we're going to start seeing the spirit women give. I mean, it's all the speakers are all Pink Boots members. So far it's been, women in the beer side who are doing the speaking at this conference, and it's really affordable. It's going to be in Charlotte. I think it's Charlottesville or something, Virginia or something. I think it's going to be in Virginia or North Carolina. I can't remember just now. Maybe North Carolina. At any rate, it's going to be in 2021. It's every other year, and we've had men attend. They tend to not show up at the social things. Probably just like too many women, But we're all like, oh my God, taste this. Oh my God, try this. So anyway, it's a blast, and you should join.
I would love to. I'm actually shocked that we haven't heard of it before. We are a team of 4 at Wanderback, and 2 of us are women. So definitely something we are interested in.
We only started welcoming our distilled spirit sisters about maybe a month ago, so that's why you haven't heard of it till now.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I'm excited for next year's International Women's Day to see how far along the women in Pink Boots who distill could contribute to that. It'd be really fun.
Yeah. And then we're going to have to, we'll raise more money, and then we got to set up spirit scholarships and wine scholarships. And what'll be cool is that as a spirit person, maybe you decide you need some wine training, or a beer person needs spirit training. There's going to be all this cross-fertilization. It just gives me the shivers. It's like, woo!
I know. And already, I mean, I think there is so much room for collaboration across the different fermentation businesses.
Oh,
I mean, getting in touch and getting great beer barrels for us is really exciting. And other people want our whiskey barrels for their beer. And there's just all sorts of fun things that we can explore.
Yes. Very cool.
Yeah. Very, very cool. All right. Well, Teri, I was going to ask, how do people join? And I understand if 20% of your income comes from kind of fermentation world, either wine, beer, distillation, then you qualify. But how do people sign up if they are interested in that?
Right, 25% actually.
25%, okay.
Your income. Yeah, so go to pinkbootssociety.org, and then one of the drop downs will say membership. And I believe it's $45 a year, but there's a lot of value in that. You know, we didn't charge dues for the first 9 years because we wanted to build the value, and now we've got the value. I mean, I think we're up to over 100 scholarships so far that we've given away. It's phenomenal. So many women. We're busting through glass ceilings because the only glass ceiling we want to talk about is the education-based glass ceiling. So we're going to blow that top. We're going to blow that top.
I love it. 100% agree. 100% agree. All right. Well, listen, Teri, it's been an absolute delight talking to you. This is Teri Fahrendorf, the manager at the Malt Innovation Center with Great Western Malting. I have enjoyed this hour so much. We appreciate it. I cannot wait to meet you in person when this COVID thing is done. Let's get it done. Yeah. And thank you for tasting our whiskey. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience. It's been a treat.
Sure. Maybe we'll design a new whiskey recipe together. Who knows?
Let's do it.
Okay.
You're on.
With the biscuit rye. Oh my gosh, with the biscuit rye would be so cool.
Well,
okay.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you, Teri. See you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Teri.
everyone.
Bye.